when I pee sometimes? Is that the thing? Can I sometimes put it in a moist environment?
Burn when you pee, that's either an STI or prostate issues.
Yeah, Steve.
You heard it here first. Amazing that I can have an STD without having sex.
I thought it was just when your bird fucking rubbed their teeth on your belly a bit too much.
Oh no, the cheese grater, one of my favourite moves actually. I've got loads of questions for a doctor. Probably shouldn't. I'm not going to ask all of them here. I might see my actual doctor, but
Yeah, well,
you get fucked off if anyone. Do you do that if you got pulled over? You'd be like, "Oh, sir," you'd be like, "Doctor."
the doctor.
And then like,
Well,
police would be like, "Oh, sorry, sir."
well, I tell you, one time my other car was an RX-8, and the speed of an RX-8, you don't, like, when you put it into 6th gear, you don't even feel how fast it's going. And a policeman guard pulled me over. He's like, "You aware what speed you're going?" I was like, "No." He goes, "You're going 180 kilometers an hour on a 100-kilometer motorway." I was like, "Okay." And I handed over my license, and obviously license says doctor, and he looks at it and he goes, "See that exit? Just come off that and go back onto the motorway." But the motorway is leading directly to the hospital, or like a national hospital. So he must have thought, "Oh, he's driving to work."
Yeah, I bet you just did it though. You were like, "Yeah, sure. Got a long day ahead of me."
Yeah, someone's dying on the table. I'm trying to go.
Did you actually drive to the hospital just in case?
No.
Just in case he followed you.
But yeah,
I would just be like, "Can you give me an escort?" Because I've always wanted an escort.
an escort.
It depends what kind of escort you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you got a few dead escorts in the back, police escort in the front. No, I just think that would be one of the best things ever. Can I? Yeah, just like take a fake phone call. Be like, "Oh my god, I got a 4-7 on thing. Oh my god, he's losing him. I can't wait right there." And then she's like, "I'm gonna have to go, officer. I'm gonna have to be there in 3 minutes, or 8 babies are gonna die." And then just be quiet. Which is probably why I never made it to being a doctor. Not gonna lie, still have no fucking idea what type of doctor he is, because he keeps saying the word and I don't know the word, and so
It just means DR in front of your name.
Pharmacology is the study of drugs.
Oh, I love drugs.
That's what. Yeah, exactly. You should be talking about the old Tremboloni sandwich.
Just call him a drug doctor. It's okay.
Oh, that is
The D doctor.
Dr. Drugs. Awesome. Probably not a good plan. Is there a scientific explanation to why when I take Tren I want to rape next door's cat?
I think it's a vet you need to go speak to.
I'm getting it all wrong. I'll catch up eventually. I think, just a few target questions and then the old cogs, and I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, my gran always said better out than in. So if I'm getting the 3-second gravy warning, I just like to let that happen. If I can at all. If it's in an area, obviously bus journeys, things like that, not great. If you get the 10, 9, 8, and it's
just
coming.
Make sure it's not a shark.
Mate, the thing is like, I think as a bodybuilder, there's no such thing as a shark, because once you open the gates of hell, that is the whole turkey dinner's coming out to play.
Right, welcome back to Bash Bros Podcast, episode 13. We have the honour of having Dr. Dean from Supplement Needs. I shall bring up his Instagram page, everyone to see, usual routine. If you don't follow Dean, head over, give him a follow. Very intelligent man, so we're going to pick his brains today with hopefully some intelligent questions and obviously some shit questions probably. So yeah, head over, give him a follow. Dean, do us a favour, bud. Give us a little rundown then of, what got you into I think it's pharmacology you said you did. What got you into it? You know, what led you down the supplement sort of path? Just a brief overview.
So I guess if anyone who's followed me probably knows my background was that I did want to go on and do medicine when I was in secondary school or high school or whatever you want to call it. And changed my mind at the last minute and chose to go down the route of chemistry and drug design. So I've done my first class honours degree in chemistry and pharmaceutical chemistry, and that involved, you know, looking into how we design drugs and how we can formulate different things, obviously, to medical conditions. And then from there I went and done a PhD in synthetic organic chemistry, which again is using, you know, synthetic means to create molecules. And I guess all throughout that, before bodybuilding, I was a kickboxer, and then obviously an accident with my ankle led me into bodybuilding more so after I won the World Championships in 2010. So I've been bodybuilding since 2011, all the way up until now, so whatever it is, nearly 10 years. And I guess at one point I decided to apply my knowledge towards enhanced bodybuilding, and a big thing that sort of started to annoy me that was going on with a lot of the forums was that no one was really thinking logically of what was going on when we look at health issues for bodybuilders. And that's sort of where I started to apply what's known as functional medicine to bodybuilding. So basically functional medicine looks at, you know, what's the root cause of a disease, whereas, you know, Western or conventional medicine normally uses a drug to treat a symptom. So that was one of the reasons why my career profession now is a chemical engineer. And I didn't go down the route of entering into, you know, drug development for pharmaceutical companies, because really at the end of the day, it was coming up with medications that literally just treat symptoms as opposed to, you know, figuring out, say for example, someone has high blood pressure, we'll just give you a antihypertensive that's going to drop your blood pressure without actually, you know, telling the patient why they have high blood pressure. And I guess that's sort of where I started to apply functional medicine when I was the educator at Jordan Peter's website. And I was educating people, you know, if your blood pressure is high, yes, you can take an antihypertensive or a calcium channel blocker, all these type of blood pressure medications, or we can actually figure out why your blood pressure has gone high, get to the root cause and address that rather than band-aiding it with a medication. I guess then from there, I sort of accidentally fell into supplement formulations with Supplement Needs by pure like serendipity of chatting to Lee, who's the owner, and basically just telling him the very first product, which was the Sleep Stack. And he had a sleep sort of ZMA product with his own line of supplements. And I just said to him, you know, the last 2 years I've been taking this sort of stack of 6 ingredients throughout prep, and my sleep has never suffered regardless of what's used. And I feel that if you were to release something like this, that would be, you know, it's going to grow exponentially within the bodybuilding world, because it's going to get to the root cause of why bodybuilders don't actually sleep, whether it's off season or pre-contest. And then again, from there, I just said to him, right, we have Sleep Stack. What if we started to develop a range of products that went from head to toe? So we started to create, you know, a heart, or the CV stack is what it's known as now. Originally it was the kidney and blood pressure stack. We changed the name. Obviously we weren't allowed to use that. We changed that to Astrag Flow, and then we developed the liver stack. So we have this, you know, trifecta of products that actually get to, you know, the root causes of when bodybuilders end up getting ill from certain supplements being used. And the ingredients chosen in those formulas were to specifically, you know, mitigate risks that happen at the root cause level, rather than, you know, if you're going to form from like 10 years ago and you're doing a cycle of orals, you're basically told, take milk thistle or take a bit of NAC and be grand. And it just got to the point where a lot of stuff that was being said was a little irresponsible, or was just failing to actually look at the underlying science of, you know, how steroids on a mechanistic level interfere with your health, and actually going down to that mechanistic level and addressing the root cause. So I guess that's sort of where my popularity has grown on Instagram and online, from just speaking out about silly things that, you know, if we think logically, science-wise, just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'd suggest you were probably the pioneer in all of that, really, in the UK for us. Before you came along, I don't think anybody was thinking about it. Like you said, me and Dan, we started in the game prior to your discovery, shall we say. And I think other than some vitamin C and omega-3 and some milk thistle, as you alluded to, that was kind of as far as it went, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I gave a talk last year at Body Power on the pharmacology of anabolic steroids and showed, you know, how we've developed all the different types of steroids and why we developed them. And I went into the health implications. And I mean, a lot of people, like, the one that shocks people the most, I think, is liver health. In that when you're at super physiological levels of testosterone or any form of androgen, your liver, we always think the liver can heal itself. That's always the, you know, the sort of bro term of, or your liver, you know, you take orals and you stop taking the orals and your liver is going to heal when you take a break from your orals, or if you take, you know, painkillers or whatever else. But when you're at that super physiological level, and this is sort of, you know, with blasting and cruising, if you're then cruising still at super physiological levels, the stem cells that go into your liver don't get the chance to enter your liver to heal. So, you know, cycle after cycle, blast over cruise, that liver damage is slowly accumulating to the point that, you know, potentially at some point you can develop a liver carcinoma, or, you know, scarring, fibrosis of the liver. And none of this was being spoken about, or even fat, you know, fatty liver disease is another thing that can happen from steroid use, and obviously orals, which again has no real symptoms until it's actually too late. And I guess, you know, educating about, you know, heart issues, so making sure that you're getting regular ECGs, echocardiograms, making sure that you're watching any physiological changes that are happening to the heart, so that, you know, you can become prepared rather than, you know, age 45 you drop dead of a heart attack because of, you know, the previous 20 years of use. I guess it's just my sort of philosophy has been to try and educate people on how to offset some of the negative consequences of steroid use, and whether it's through, you know, intelligent stack design, you know, understanding each of the different compounds and why you use them, or using supplementation, health supplementation, to try and offset some of the negative impacts. So I guess that's sort of where people fell in line with following me, that I started to, you know, speak up. And I guess the other big thing is my whole PCT protocol, which sort of, you know, slapped other well-known people in the industry in the face because it was just blatantly wrong that was being taught.
So do you wanna maybe if, you know, sort of explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so what would be now? It's nearly 3 years since I released a video called Flaws of Modern PCT on YouTube. And it was just an off-the-cuff sort of thing that I kept seeing on Jordan's forum of, you know, guys posting their blood work after doing PCTs and the PCT failing. So meaning their testosterone, their LH, and their FSH hadn't recovered from doing their PCT. And when I delved further into, you know, what they'd done for their PCT, the compounds that they used, it didn't make sense. You know, the protocol that they were following to restore their HPTA didn't make any sense whatsoever. And it was sort of expected that the PCT failed. So when we look at PCT, the power PCT is normally the protocol that people speak about, which is 20 days of 2,000 IUs of HCG every other day, ran alongside tamoxifen. And that's used for 20,000 IUs. So every other day for 20 days, you use the HCG. If you go on any form, it's basically telling you start your HCG after 2 weeks. The big flaw there is that, say for example, your cycle was mainly enanthate or cypionate esters. They have half-lives of, you know, 5 to 7 days. So on average, it's going to take about 5 weeks for that drug to clear from your system. If you start PCT at the 2 week mark after your last shot, there's still exogenous exogenous testosterone in your system. And your HPTA is reliant on there being no exogenous testosterone present, as well as no high levels of estrogen being present before it will restart. So if you start your HCG at that 2-week mark, by the time you finish those 20 days, you roughly end up at, week 5 of the drug clearing. And at that point, you're going straight into what's, prescribed of Clomid and more Novodex. But at that point, you don't really know is your HPTA recovered. You're just following a protocol of, HCG for 20 days, and then I take my Clomid, do that for 6 weeks, and then magically my testosterone will be back. So I decided to sort of educate on it, and that, we wait for the drugs to clear. We give the body whatever the time is for the 5 half-lives. So if it's an anti, it's 5 weeks. If it's propionate, it's about 3 weeks. But at that 5-week mark, you get your bloods done, and you see where your testosterone, LH, and FSH are. Some people are going to get lucky, and their HPTA responds. Once the drug clears from their system, their brain starts sending the signal to make the 2 fertility hormones, LH and FSH. And the system restarts by itself. No drugs required. You just literally be patient and let the body do what it needs to do. The only time then we need to use compounds like HCG, Clomid, tamoxifen is when the HPTA doesn't turn back on once the drugs clear. And at that point, then you start HCG, which is basically an LH mimic. And that LH mimic is designed to tell your testicles to make testosterone synthetically. So obviously your testicles get stimulated, the Leydig cells make some testosterone. That low level of testosterone can go back to the brain and tell it, look, there's a low level of testosterone after being made at the testicle. Start making gonadotropin releasing hormone, which controls that cycle. And that gonadotropin hormone then gets secreted from the hypothalamus to the pituitary and starts outputting your own LH and FSH. And so that was why I said, first of all, when you do start HCG, you need to control estrogen. So obviously that when you create that testosterone in your testicle, you don't want it to aromatize the estrogen. You want to keep it as testosterone. So that was where I started to apply aromasin as the aromatase inhibitor, because again, that can have positive effects back in the hypothalamus. And basically when you do your 20 days, the 20,000 IUs of HCG, you go and get your bloods done at that point. And you see, after those 20 days of doing HCG, how has your HPTA responded to that? So do you see a positive increase in the LH and FSH hormones? And do you see testosterone being produced by your testicles from the HCG? If it's all green lights at that point where you have normal testosterone, which is from the HCG, and you have LH and FSH coming from your pituitary, well, that's when we drop out the HCG and put in the Clomid. Because Clomid's underlying mechanism of action is that it acts on estrogen receptors within the pituitary to output more LH. So you're basically telling the body, make more LH naturally, which is going to result in more testosterone being made. At that point, you go through that cycle of taking the Clomid, and at the end of the 6 weeks of taking the Clomid, you do blood work again to make sure that the HPTA is switched back on. And I think most guys they were just literally going onto the forums, taking this power PCT protocol, running it through to the end of week 8 or 9, and then magically thinking that their HPTAs turn back on again. And then the other sort of thing that people were doing, and as you do a full PCT like that, there's absolutely no point in my mind anyway that if you do that type of PCT and you go back on gear within 6 weeks, you just wasted your time. And that's sort of where, I've started to speak about the concept of TRT, and then you do your cycle, which is sort of replacing blasting and cruising. So in other words, rather than taking potentially some of the health risks from running a cycle into a cruise, what you're basically doing is you're replacing the PCT with a true TRT dose. So you're basically dropping back to a physiological level where you'd fall naturally anyway with your PCT, but you're not having to deal with the negative consequence of, obviously for the first 5 to 6 weeks of your PCT, you're letting your hormones crash deliberately in order to restart that HPTA cycle. And that can have negative health effects towards your pancreas, your lipid metabolism. You know, you can lose strength, it can offset your mentality. So for an amateur bodybuilder that's going to do another cycle, you know, within 10 to 12 weeks of finishing their current one, that TRT approach allows them to drop back to physiological levels, so to a natural testosterone level, and then take care of their health during that 10 to 12 week period to allow whatever processes are getting disturbed from the higher level of testosterone to come back to their baseline, basically, without the need for PCT.
So in regards to, so I've pretty much followed that sort of principle for the last, I'd say, 3 years now. And all my blood work's always been okay. You know, barring the odd occasion, you know, I've had my healthy cholesterol's been a little low or whatever. But how long can people do that for? Do you advise only do that for X amount of time, or do you reckon? I mean, obviously, I'm still competing. Well, it's within question. Some years I'm retired, some years I'm not. But I'm constantly training and obviously trying to progress and go forward. So, you know, for me, doing a PCT, as you suggested, yields very little sort of, you know, positive results because I don't let it. It's not going to be long enough. So how long can somebody do the TRT for, would you say?
It's a hard question to give it an accurate answer on, because I guess the main issue with running TRT and like blasts or cycles is that your HPTA is shut down, so your LH and FSH aren't being produced from the pituitary, so your fertility takes an impact there. In terms of your health, provided that, you know, the dose of testosterone that you use in that TRT phase is physiological, then obviously, depending on genetics, like you said, your good cholesterol, HDL, might be slightly out, but everything else should be able to come back to baseline.
What for those of us that are watching, and I've heard some pretty amazing ideas of what someone thinks a baseline TRT is. Can you just clear that up for everyone?
So for me personally, I think baseline TRT should fall within the physiological range, which is anywhere from 8 nanomolar up to 34 is the highest. So the other thing that needs to be considered as well is that, say for example, your natural testosterone level without touching any gear or anything before you started at all was 8 nanomolar. That's your natural testosterone that you produce naturally. If you cruise or you TRT at 22 nanomolar, well, you're 3 times your genetic limit of what your body makes. So there are going to be potentially health issues like, for example, androgens or testosterone increases the production of hepatic lipase in your liver. Hepatic lipase is an enzyme which destroys HDL. So that's why we see the likes of Trenbolone, Anavar, those type of androgens destroy HDL because of its effects through the androgen receptor. So if you are on TRT, say at 20, for example, 24 nanomolar, which is 3 times your baseline at 8, there's potential there that your HDL is going to sit at a lower level than if you went back to obviously 8 nanomolar. But, you know, as a competitive bodybuilder, you have to then understand that, okay, if you drop back to true TRT to 8 nanomolar, you are going to lose quite a significant amount of strength, and you are pushing yourself sort of towards hypergonadism. So it doesn't make sense to push yourself back to where your natural level should be. So in a TRT phase, we sort of try and aim to keep our testosterone in around 22 to 24 nanomolar. You could push it up to 30, but again, like I said, you have to take into account where someone's genetic baseline was previously.
What does that look like in drugs?
Dose-wise, so 24 nanomolar, 25 nanomolar, you could achieve that with about 150 milligrams of testosterone and ante per week.
There it is. And I tell you what, that's a lot lower than I've been hearing from messages. Of like a half a gram is not a TRT dose.
Oh.
And what some of the things are like, doing a gram of Primo isn't TRT.
No, again, like this is sort of the advice that's been coming out in the last few years. I've sort of stepped away from those who are giving that sort of advice because it's just irresponsible in my mind. I mean, there's a video there on my Instagram profile of a 9-plate hack squat, and I posted up my testosterone result, which is 23 nanomolar. That's 8 weeks into TRT, so that's a true physiological level of testosterone, and I'm still hack squatting 9 plates aside. So, you know, this whole concept of I'm going to massively shrink when I drop my dose after a blast, of course, you're going to lose some muscle mass because you're losing some of the stimulation from the androgen receptor. So you're going to lose a certain amount of nitrogen retention that you gain at a super physiological or blast level of drugs. But the whole concept that we need to understand is that as soon as we go from physiological back to super physiological, in about 3 weeks, you gain back quite a lot of the tissue that you lost from that lack of stimulation.
Would you say that it's unrealistic if you are blasting and cruising to make muscular gains whilst you are cruising or on TRT dosage?
No. Again, if your baseline genetics had you at 8 nanomolar, and
but if you've come off a blast of like 2 gram overall and you drop into 25, then are you saying that you could still gain from your cycle finish point?
You can, yeah. Again, it's all down to training, recovery, diet. The drugs, the superphysiological level of drugs is going to allow you to obviously train at a higher intensity, recover so you can train at a higher frequency. But that still doesn't dictate that, you know, when you drop back to a physiological level, to TRT, that you can't continue to progress.
Okay.
Yeah, you idea first.
That's great. Cause I don't even bother trying, to be honest, because I've never found that to be the case. So when I'm not trying to like go balls out, I bring my training back because I can't recover from what I could when I was doing it, and I don't try and hit weekly PBs, and I don't do triple drop set extended sets.
Exactly.
I find that my strength does always take a hit. So it's interesting to say that conceptually I should be able to progress all the time. It's interesting.
But obviously,
or the average person, maybe it's just a me thing.
Well, you know, you also have to take into account, so when you drop back to a TRT dose, depending on your genetics again towards, you know, 5-alpha reductase and how much DHT you're making, that's what is inevitably giving you resilience to your CNS. So if you're not making enough DHT during a physiological phase, of course your recovery and your central nervous system is going to take a big hit. But the whole thing of not being able to progress all the time, of course, when you drop back from a blast where your strength, you know, obviously androgen receptors getting activated, it's going to lead to all sorts of different genetic cascades. Your strength in terms of dropping from super physiological back to physiological, in terms of how much strength you're going to lose, it shouldn't be, you know, any greater than 25%.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether we're batting in the same side here, because maybe I just didn't phrase it correctly. I think what I was trying to ask is, say I finished my blast an absolute all-time strength high, to then drop to a TRT, and then be able to then move forward from my all-time high whilst cruising was kind of...
No, you're not going to have the same recovery.
Yeah, I mean that...
But in terms of what I'm trying to say in terms of progress, you should still be able to hold progress of what you developed on cycle back at that physiological level.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of, we are batting for the same thing. I mean, conceptually, because I mean, you know, without having your level of expertise, like we have to take what we can understand of yours, which is going to be limited because we don't even have the language that you do, spiced together with a bit of experience and bro science. And so, yeah, it's difficult to know. It's interesting to hear like the idea from, like you said, like a physiological like perspective, rather than just kind of things that we might have picked up along the way, and just kind of, because I label things as like, yeah, cool, that's how it works, And then when I try and break down how I came across that, like a bit fucking stumped. And I certainly can't throw fucking knowledge bombs at them like you. But yeah, that's interesting. That was going to be one of my questions anyway.
Yeah, again, like we're coming at this sort of from a longevity perspective. If someone, say, was cruising on 350 milligrams and 300 milligrams of Primo, for someone who is a professional or their livelihood depends on maximum retention of muscle mass year round, or there's, money contracts involved, well then, okay, they have to accept that responsibility of their health and longevity, obviously taking a knock, because that's what's earning them money. But for an amateur to do this sort of stuff, that's working, 9 to 5 with a family, not thinking of, when they're later on 45, 50 with their kids or even grandkids, that's where the problem starts to enter in. And that's sort of where I started to speak up about.
Yeah, because you see the people, they're looking at the pros, like you said, the people who this is their whole life and it fuels their entire existence financially, and it is their career. And then you've got people starting out looking at them and trying to apply professional level drug protocols to mediocre and beginner level physiques, who are also, bodybuilding's not going to pay out, really, is it? A very, very small percentage of people are going to get something back financially or make a living from it. So I can completely understand why you did that, because it's like everyone wants to be a bodybuilder, you want to do your thing, but you've got to weigh up like your life. Are you going to be like a pro or whatever? What you're willing to do to sacrifice, winning a regional show, it's probably not really worth it when you can have many more life successes, alongside bodybuilding as a hobby, which I still consider bodybuilding as a hobby.
Yeah, no, me also. I mean, the other sort of thing was, like, if we take that sort of logic towards first cycles and how someone should approach their first cycle. Now, the intelligent way to do this is, again, that person needs to see where their testosterone is naturally. So again, say, for example, that person, we keep going back to the very bottom of the range to 8. So if you go into any form, generally, or online, whatever, the first sort of cycle dose you see at someone is, run test at 350 or 400 milligrams. That's your first cycle basis. Now, that person has a test level of 8. We know that a dose of about 200 to 250 milligrams is going to have someone's test level around 40. So they're going now from 8 to 40 with 250 milligrams. With 350 to 400, they're easily pushing into the 75 to 80 region.
I think that's it. People don't realize how little natural produces. Well, you only have you're gonna only have to look at Jack to realize by his beard he's not producing a lot of natural testosterone. But I think people really do think that a natural dose is 250 a week. They literally
for that person who's at 8 nanomolar, when they take 250 and their level ends up at 40, they have 5 times their natural level of testosterone in their body. So now with their first cycle, if they go in at that dose to start at 5 times their natural level, they can now see safely, do they aromatize to a high extent? So do they have estrogen problems when they take testosterone? Do they 5-alpha reduce? Do they start to see all these androgenic side effects like acne, hair loss? And then, they can assess, do they have better recovery, better strength? They can make all these assumptions then off that increasing it 5 times, rather than, listening to someone and going in at 400, which is going to put them, at nearly 10 times what their natural level is, which isn't a bad thing. But in terms of allowing you to assess your first cycle round with minimal side effects, going in low at where you're, again, this changes. Say, for example, we have an elite natural bodybuilder whose test level is 35 at the very top of the range. Well, it makes no sense for them to go in at 40 nanomolar. Because they're matching what they make physiologically. In that case, that person might have to go to 70 or 90 nanomolar because, you're going double or triple their natural level. Yeah,
I mean, that's interesting. Jack, have you ever had your test levels checked out?
I did in 2018, so not that long after a contest prep. I can't remember.
You had one.
It would have been there, it would have been in the gutters, because I can remember The reason why I had it done was because I was feeling pretty awful, and like my sex drive was absolutely horrendous. And it was quite a decent time after it as well. It was still like 3 months plus after the contest prep. So, but I can't remember the number. I might still have it, so I'll double check. But I am going to get it done before starting prep next year, and then afterwards as well, because it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that this stuff's available. Do you know what I mean? And like, I think if you're starting out and you're watching this, or whatever, this stuff like never existed when us cunts were around. Like,
Yeah, it was.
you know, it is there, and a test only test isn't actually that much money. Like getting full blood work's like quite expensive, like which you should do, but maybe not as regular intervals as like getting a test check. I've actually got one just sat here ready
Yeah, I
to
mean,
go.
like test only finger prick from Medicheck's about £30.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. And
The irony is when me and Dan
Try it.
started back in the day, it was a case of you asked the local bodybuilder, he went, yeah, System Decker, and then off you went with a bit of System Decker. If I ever had the foresight to take my natural testosterone level back then, I'd be rich right now, but yeah, just not.
well, this is the thing as well, and this goes for, and I'm sure this is kind of why you're speaking out to educate people, is that like the steroids have now become a drug dealer sideline. It's not bodybuilders like creating things. No one gives a fuck about the end user. It's not an in scene. It's not a scene. It's not on anything. And the amount of people that come to me were like, they go, oh, I've just started my first cycle. And in my head, I already go, Tren. And they're like, yeah, Tren. And I'm like, this is already like you've gone from like nothing to like the most mental thing ever. And because the guy who saw it was like, this stuff, yeah. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
all
like,
of you, 16, this will be fine.
Yeah. I mean, I had a consult last year where this guy he's a top level natural bodybuilder in Australia, and obviously he wanted to progress into the IFBB. And he was sitting with me, and I was discussing this with him, obviously, where his natural test was, you know, if we're going to do your first cycle, you can, you know, take your test level, you know, 4 or 5 times what your natural level is, and allow you to see, you know, is this the route for you? And so he messaged me, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks into starting. So obviously he just started with test only and a dose that brought him into, you know, the 4 or 5 times range. He goes, yeah, my 3 other mates just joined me along on my cycle, but they're after listening to this guy in the gym. He's quite a big guy, and he has them starting on 400 milligrams of test and 350 milligrams of Tren-E. I'm like, just let them off and do what they want to do.
Yeah. And I think when you start off as well, like
It's still a low cycle.
that's the fucking mad shit that's seen as a low cycle. Like the things I've heard of people putting in 2 grams Tren and shit, and it's like how like, I mean, apart from the health implications as well, but just like mentally, what I mean, Dorian always used to say that there was this, I mean, this is bro science, but there's a sweet spot, you know, where more isn't more, because the amount of downsides you get or side effects you get from using all of these things impacts your training, your sleep, and your recovery to an extent where there's no point past a certain point of doing it. I mean, obviously I don't know the scientific explanation of that, but if you do enough and you start taking a hit, I imagine on some of your organs start feeling sluggish and your CNS is fucked. Like, there's a point, more isn't more. That's not a thing. I mean, that's a bro science. So here's the real science.
No, it's actually like real science, because we have what's called a toxic versus therapeutic approach. So you have toxic versus therapeutic dosages. So you take 2 paracetamols, it gets rid of your headache. Take 40 of them and your organs are going to shut down. Like this is like basics of pharmacology, that we have to find, you know, the least effective dose to give us the desired effect.
And
Also,
that's what people aren't trying to do. They're not trying to find the minimum they can get away with for the maximum. They're just like, what's the most I can do without dying?
Is there a genetic part to that as well, though? Obviously, it's going to vary on the individual, but is there at the other end of the scale as well? So obviously, certain individuals will be able to take a lot more than others without yielding negative results.
They can, and I mean, I've seen it where you know, people have used trenbolone and have perfect HDL, which is, you know, an anomaly, but I've seen
These guys.
Yeah, fuck 'em.
And you mean, you know, like that sort of, you know, at a genetic level, their liver isn't making that hepatic lipase to the same extent as someone else. You can have also, you know, what I've covered before on other podcasts was, you know, you can have a fast metabolizer and a slow metabolizer. So I've personally seen someone they've done a consult with me and their testosterone level was average, say 20 nanomolar. So we said, okay, you know, we'll go in at 250, 300 milligrams and your level will sit around 65. 6 weeks later, they sent me their blood work and their test level was 135. That's a slow metabolizer. That's sky high testosterone, like for such a small dose, because their liver isn't clearing the drug fast compared to a normal individual.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, you need to understand what your genetic capabilities in terms of how you metabolize these drugs also.
And you just never know that. You would never know that unless
No,
you go through that.
you know, unless you sort of do this sort of methodology in the start to
Yeah.
see. And then, you know, you can still apply it. You know, if you do a decent cycle and you get your blood work done on cycle, you can still assess, are you a fast or slow metabolizer, because you'll have a rough idea in your head of where your levels should sit. But yeah, the whole thing is, you know, fast metabolizer is going to clear the drug faster out of their system. So they're going to need more dose to give the response. Slow metabolizer stays in their system longer. They may need lower dose than a normal person. And that's sort of, you know, regardless of even looking at the basic receptor level genetics, liver metabolism is, you know, the fundamental part of these drugs building up in our system.
You know, like the crazy thing is that you talk about that cycle of like 400 and 350. So many people just lie about it. Even like people are like, oh, you're the most I've used a gram, and when like you talk about it behind closed doors, and they're putting on social media that I use this, and they're like, actually I use 3 grams. It's kind of like, it's something that kind of upsets me to a point, because I'm like, when I first started bodybuilding, you look at this and you think, oh, it's never possible. I can never look like that. You know, it's such a misleading sort of industry too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, okay, if we're to, you know, view it on the most basic level, more in some case is better in terms of, you know, you push dosages to an extent, you're going to get a more favorable response. But, you know, as Daniel brought up, there is a point where there's diminished returns. So where someone is saying, you know, their pre-contest cycle is like a gram of test and 1.5 grams of Tren E, and they weigh 250 pounds, you know, to me that is ridiculous. I don't know where, you know, I don't know where the philosophy from science came from for that dosage, to be honest. There's absolutely no, like, and that's before you even take into account other compounds within the stack, like Masteron, Primabol, and Anavar, Winstrol. You know, 2.5 grams between Tren and test is nothing to laugh about.
This is another question that I was interested with, which was a stacking question and receptor favorability, which is like something that I've heard about and stuff. And some compounds kind of get the green light on receptors, and they say that there's no point in running certain dosages and compounds together because the receptors favor one and then the rest just aromatize. But it wasn't necessarily from a source that I really like. I found it interesting. I wasn't sure. I kind of leant more on bro science, and it's like, but these guys got massive, and I just wonder, like what that's all about.
So, you know, again, at basic level of pharmacology, we look at the binding affinity of drugs for the receptor. So we can see how strong does that drug bind to the androgen receptor. So, for example, the standard that you used to do, because obviously they had to do receptor binding assays to, you know, rank all these steroids of this one's better than this one and this one's better than that one. The one at the very top that has 100% affinity for the androgen receptor is methyltranolone or methyl-tren, the oral methyl-tren. That binds to, if you were to put, you know, methyltranolone into a solution of androgen receptors, it'll occupy every single one of them.
Crazy stuff.
Versus testosterone has a binding affinity of 25%. DHT has a binding affinity of about 80%. So you start to see, you know, DHT binds more favorably to the androgen receptor than testosterone. So when you're building stacks, people used to think of that methodology of, okay, I can't stack this with this because this has a better binding affinity than that one. But if you look at oral steroids like Winstrol and Anavar, oxymetholone, Anadrol, they have binding affinities like 0.2, 0.3%. They have a totally different mechanistic action compared to the other injectable steroids. So you can't just view it as this has better binding affinity than this, and so I can't stack the two of them together. Because again, you don't know that person's genetic distribution of androgen receptors. You don't know, you know, what's the max dose to saturate those receptors. We don't have this data. So you can't say, you know, 100 milligrams of nandrolone versus 100 milligrams of trenbolone. You know, nandrolone's going to only occupy 80% of your body's receptors at 100 milligrams. And then you go, okay, well, if 100 milligrams of nandrolone occupies 80%, well, then if I took, you know, 150 nandrolone, that's 100% receptors occupied. But we don't have that data. We don't know. We don't have dose correlations to receptor affinity. But if we did, then you would be able to say, okay, when I'm designing my stack, I know that I have X amount of androgen receptors. And certain compounds will have better affinities than others. So it might not be wise to stack this one with this one, or, you know, take them at different times. So use this compound one day and then use the other compound the next day because of how they clear into the system.
I know this is like it can't actually, it's an imaginary situation, but people at the top level, would it ever be possible for them to have tests done that they could work out essentially like their perfect dose?
I guess what you could try and do is do muscle biopsies and see how many androgen receptors are in a, you know, a standard muscle biopsy, and then trying to, I guess, correlate that back to body weight. And then from there, you might be able to say, well, this person has X number of receptors, and then from there, design, you know, the perfect stack. But, you know, from, I guess, with professionals, the caveat there is when most professionals reach their sort of peak, drug usage tends to fall back. Once most of the groundwork is sort of built, unless that pro is, you know, aiming to put on significantly more tissue season to season, most season pros usage is a lot lower than what you'd think.
I just had visions of Dolph Lundgren from Rocky then.
As soon as you said that, I just thought Dexter Jackson. That's just what I thought.
Oh no, I meant the bit where they had them in doing the biopsies and working out the.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. Right. So questions, lads. What are you going?
Oh yeah.
I've completely exploded already. It's amazing.
Dean, with
say fuck or bugger or anything. It's amazing.
Yeah, with obviously being on a cycle and obviously continuing with like an 8 to 12 week cycle and stuff. I know we talk about the obviously estrogen levels. What's the best sort of approach to take with that, with keeping that estrogen down while being on cycle?
So with estrogen, I always say again, because we have it available to us, 2 weeks into your cycle, get your estrogen checked.
Yeah.
At that point, you'll be able to assess. Again, I guess applying functional medicine to this sort of question, you need to assess what symptoms you have first of all. So say, for example, at 2 weeks into your cycle, you start developing gyno. But, you know, in that case, you know, your estrogen is too high and it's acting at the breast tissue. So, you know, immediately you're going to want to block those receptors with tamoxifen before you get your blood work done to assess where your level is. Then when you get your blood work, you can assess, you know, okay, my estrogen's at 300 and the range is up to 180 picomolar. So from there, then you can say, okay, either I drop the dosage of the aromatizing compounds and replace them with non-aromatizing compounds, or you have to inevitably introduce an aromatase inhibitor to offset that estrogen production. The other thing that most people don't look at then is if you block the estrogen receptor breast tissue with tamoxifen, it still allows free circulating estrogen to move freely through the body, which can be a positive thing, because then it has positive impacts to bone mineral metabolism. So you retain more calcium in your bones. It can have less unfavorable effects to your lipid panel. The only sort of, I guess, negative would be mineral retention and water retention from that high estrogen level. So if you see blood pressure increase, well, then obviously then you're going to need to either, like I said, decrease the aromatizing dose or implement the AI.
In a fucking nutshell.
Realistically, you're better to decrease the dose, though, right? Like taking 3 Arimidex a day is not good.
No, and I mean, there should never be any need to go that high with aromatase inhibitors.
We throw some numbers at you for an example of high estrogen or free floating estrogen, and then the dose that you would necessarily need to map out. Because again, this is like, people talk like, take one. What's the dose of the tablet and stuff? This is not information that's freely available, and most of the time people won't take it from me because I've got that head probably.
I mean, like, so the aromatase inhibitors, we have 3 sort of main commercial ones. There's Arimidex, anastrozole, exemestane, which is aromacin, and then the sort of daddy that should never really be used, letrozole. So we need to also look at the structures of these aromatase inhibitors. So as you know, aromatase is an enzyme, so we can either competitively inhibit the enzyme, meaning that the aromatase inhibitor binds to aromatase but doesn't actually destroy it. Or you can have a suicide inhibitor that just literally binds to aromatase and F's it up, and it you know, changes the complete conformation of that enzyme so it can't work anymore. Probably the sort of like best one, and that's why I don't really like Arimidex, because it's, you know, it's competitive, so it can allow still a level of aromatization to occur. If we go sort of the route of aromacin, it's a steroidal based suicide inhibitor, so it's going to actually destroy aromatase. But because it's steroidal based, when it gets processed at the liver, it still has similar effects to estrogen. So say, for example, someone's estrogen level is, say, 280. What we sort of want to look at is their dosing frequency, so how often they're dosing their compounds. So ideally, you know, with setting up your cycle, you should be intelligently splitting the dosage as well to minimize how the compounds clear into your system.
And that's even if they're fast acting.
That, yeah, even if, like, you know, say for an anti, doing 500 milligrams once per week is going to yield a huge spike in testosterone levels the day after the injection. Whereas if you split that 500 into 250 shots, you know, Monday, Thursday, you're going to end up with the same weekly dose, but a smaller peak between the injections.
Which is so fucking obvious when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like,
you know,
that was the thing. It's like people like, I take test E or whatever because I can just do a gram like once a week. I hate needles.
Yeah, I can do 4 meals on a Sunday and forget about it.
So get it out of the way.
So for me, obviously, when you increase your AI, the side effects of that will be like decreased water retention and stuff. So one thing I find is a lot of people, when they discuss it, they have their go-to dosage of tamoxifen or AI, and they kind of carbon copy that. They just use it because they get told to. But so based on what you've just said, that can obviously decrease the water retention. That can essentially slow down progress and sort of muscle water retention and gain and stuff. Is that true?
Not necessarily. I mean, obviously you do want, so the benefits of, I guess, water retention in a cycle is that you have higher intramuscular water retention. So again, you have better chances for, I guess, sarcoplasmic volume increases, which, you know, when you're training, then potentially fills a bigger space for muscle fibers to grow into. But you also have this sort of joint protection where, you know, the synovial fluid around your joints is cushioned with more fluid. So, you know, friction forces on your joints are decreased then again. So you have better strength, better recovery. Of course, you know, if you drop your estrogen too low off season, so if you like drop it down into like the 30s and 40s, thinking that, you know, getting rid of estrogen is the best thing ever, you know, you are going to impact your growth in an off season. And that's sort of where we want to make sure that estrogen stays as high as possible without creating any side effects or symptoms.
Yeah.
So you were just you were quoting a figure of an estrogen level of 200.
So say 280 is quite
yeah.
high. So we're gone, like 180 is the top. So we've gone into the 280 region, which is high estrogen. So say that person's doing, you know, let's pick a figure. Say they're doing 400 milligrams of testosterone and they're splitting that 200 Monday, 200 Thursday. In theory, for that high level of estrogen, 12.5 milligrams of aromasin the days after the injections, so the Tuesday and the Friday, and then the day before the first injection, so Sunday, so 12.5 milligrams roughly 3 times a week, will bring that level from 280 down to about 175.
It's good to have a baseline. Obviously, people at home can do the maths on this. You might need a calculator, okay? But just because people don't talk like this, they like take one. It's like, well, we're having the tablet, like. And
you know, like then it gets to like, so when it comes to the estrogen's a really funny topic when we get to pre-contest preparations, because it seems that this is where you can see where someone's knowledge of drugs greatly diminishes when they tell you, okay, for the last 2 weeks of this contest prep, we're going to take 2.5 milligrams of letrozole, 1 milligram of Arimidex, and, you know, we're going to do 20 milligrams of tamoxifen every day. Well, 2.5 milligrams of letrozole has an affinity for aromatase up to nearly 99%. So it's going to push your estrogen down into single digits, regardless of adding in the Arimidex.
280, you'd literally get like 2.8.
So again, like what we discussed there, this is potentially where you can see someone's physique go to utter shit, because throughout their prep, they've had a certain level of aromatization, a certain level of estrogen that's led to water and mineral retention. So their body appears full. And again, this is sort of where you have to assess someone's genetics in the final 2 weeks heading into the end of a stage prep, in that, do you pull testosterone or not? Because there's this sort of thing of, oh, you know, the last 2 weeks before the show, stop all testosterone because you want to be so dry. But if that testosterone is what's aiding in mineral retention and fullness, as soon as that's dropped out, as soon as you start running sky-high anti-estrogens, that physique just goes utterly to shit. It completely flattens out, and you lose that, you know, fullness that the compounds are actually yielding in the first place. And I just never understood, you know, people going down this route of dropping everything out, throw a load of anti-estrogens in rather than actually paying attention to what's going on with that person's body.
I've heard a lot of that, and doses that no one even knows what they are. Take 5 of these things. Well, how big are the things? Take them 5.
And then it gets
6 mil of
and then, you know, like then it gets to the diuretics, and it's like, here, pop one of these for the next 4 days.
Oh, fucking hell. Yeah, yeah.
You know, like someone giving you
sparing diuretics to make sure you die.
Yeah, you know, like someone turns around and goes, here, diazide, half a diazide tablets for the next 5 days. Like, I just, in the end, you know, the guys that are sort of giving out this protocol are either don't really understand what's going on with your body and is banking on that diuretic being you know, an insurance policy that, oh, if I really mess up this carb up, I can rely on diazide to pull all the water out of that person's body. And not, you know, understand that, okay, there's going to come a point then when that person's pissing out potassium and could have a heart attack if they eat the wrong foods.
Knowledge grenades everywhere. It's just almost
hyperkalemia, right?
Almost too much.
Hyperkalemia is too much potassium.
Yeah.
Link it, like carrying on from like incorrect dosages given out. Do you think that social media has done is like a good thing in terms of like people can educate, or do you feel that it's the opposite and too many people have a voice now and incorrect information is given out too often? Do you think it's like a bit of both, or do you think it's more positive?
I think it's really sort of in the middle, because even before social media, we had bodybuilding forums. So, you know, okay, with social media like Instagram, it brings about a visual aspect. So you're like watching someone's physique. But to be honest, there's not much open discussion on IG surrounding what people are doing. You know, people see physique pictures from stage, or, you know, from in the gym or prep shoots. But there's never any, you know, overall discussion of, oh, this is what I'm taking, or this is why I'm taking this.
It's a huge, you know, discussion. And like you said, you've put your life's work into this. That's not something that your average person can wrap their head around. But I think that, you know, if you are giving out these protocols, you should at least have someone contactable to check these sorts of things out. No one can be an expert at every level of this.
Exactly.
You need to double check what you're doing isn't fucking dangerous, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like the putting your trust in a coach, to be honest, again is a bit of Russian roulette, because you're really putting your faith in that person having your best interest at heart. And if it's not, you know, if there's no education behind what's being applied to your body, the two of you are shooting in the dark, basically.
And there is a lot of people. There are loads of really great coaches. Of course they are. I'm one of them. But there's a lot of people starting out, you know, that have done like a level 3 PT course and done one cycle of tren or something, and then they're like, contest prep, get with me.
Yeah.
No, they came third out of 3 at the local show.
At the local gentleman's club, I did a wet t-shirt competition and came 9th. And so contest prep hit me up. 2 grams of tren straight off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like even with Ryan, I remember I helped Ryan for one of his shows a couple of years ago, and I dialed everything back from who I took over for the show for Ryan. And Ryan, if Ryan will even say, Ryan started going to me, what are you doing? What are you doing this for? I'm like, trust me.
This is like every fucking 65 minutes, taking my blood glucose.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I want to eat some carbohydrates. And he's like, oh, almond butter, white fish. I was like, fucking, we need some carbs.
But like what was previously planned out for Ryan, I took it, and like most of it just went out the window. And his physique was probably on par to where it was at the previous show to that one that I took over for. Like, you know, there's a certain level where you have to really, when you have people's lives basically in your hands, with these compounds, it's no longer a matter of, you know, writing generic prescriptions of this is the dose you're going to take. It sort of has to be logical of why we're using that dose and adjusting if necessary. Like, again, you know, if we push androgens too high, and like what Dan was saying earlier, if sleep starts to suffer at the end of prep, if you have to work a full-time job, you may forget about it, because you're just going to be going around your job like a zombie.
Yeah, I don't know why I've managed to like be like, and maybe it's just because I'm not a big eater, but I'm a teacher, and I managed to like I feel pretty wank about 4 weeks out, but I think that's pretty much you're staring at the wall for a few hours or whatever. But yeah, I don't really like, I just don't sleep in the off season, basically. I've got sleep apnea. I've got this fucking CPAP machine. I like my missus's dad felt sorry for me, so he bought me an aircon unit because I was just a huge red mess. But that's my thing. But I think people are willing to accept feeling like dog shit, and like because they want to be hardcore and stuff like that. Like, you shouldn't generally, like, you know, your middle level kind of bodybuilder taking a little bit of gear shouldn't be feeling like wank, really. No. Should they?
No, both off season and even like obviously prep. If you get down to ridiculous like striated glute conditioning, yeah, that sucks. For the last 3 weeks, you do just have to just suck it up, and your sleep is going to be shit. But that's just an artifact of, again, where your metabolic rate is, and obviously the turnover of catecholamines in your brain, like adrenaline and noradrenaline, like basically not allowing you to sleep any more than 5 hours. But for the off season, if you're not sleeping, again, if it's genetic, that's fine. If you get away with less sleep, you can't just drive this whole 7-8 hours in bed sort of things on people when there is a scientific way to approach how many sleep cycles they should be getting.
Mate, my sleep cycle is fucking hilarious. I sleep 5 hours pretty much every night, and although I've tried to take control and do whatever I can, I don't think I've ever slept more than 5 hours. And although I'm not the biggest guy, I've hit 300 pound, I've won a few titles here and there, on 5 hours sleep. Maybe I'm a 5 hours sleep guy, but I do find the suffocating when I'm heavy from sleep apnea and stuff. And then obviously the introduction of the mask is really a horrible way to sleep as well.
Yeah.
And I've tried various sleep stacks as well as some pretty heavy drugs, and it still doesn't, only thing the CPAP sort of did for me was hold me in sleep for about 3 or 4 hours consistently, where I was awake 3 or 4 times an hour.
Yeah.
Probably the only benefit. But this brings me on to another thing. I don't know whether this probably isn't your game at all or whatever, but the Aura Ring obviously has taken a huge popularity. Yeah. And I find it very very useful. But how literally should we take its ability to read REM and deep sleep?
So I've always said with sleep apps, they should be taken with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
I said this in the very start, because what ends up happening is, yes, it's great data because it tells you, oh, you got an hour deep sleep or you got an hour of REM or whatever. But if you start to turn this into a data-centric driven obsession, where, if you don't get an hour's deep sleep, that's the fucking day ruined. Then, it comes down to you're putting all your sleep efforts, or you're getting anxious before bed thinking about what your sleep score is going to be the next morning. Well, then it's useless to you because it's just creating a problem to your sleep.
Absolutely. I do say this to people, it also, its ability to really know, there's the reason they have fucking neuroconnectors when they actually do sleep.
Yeah, for deep sleep analysis, it is, there's neurological connections to monitor the theta and delta waves in your brain. Now this, in terms of versus a Fitbit and the Oura Ring, I've done an experiment where I put the Fitbit on my arm and the Oura Ring on the same side, and then repeat it the next night. And the two of them are nearly fairly accurate within each other of, the sleep stage analysis. So again, it is just a dryometer measuring you moving about. But
you just done a short test and had a quick wank, see if it yielded the same.
Mate, 1,000 steps. Well, 3 steps. But they were good steps.
The best way I approach this with any of those sort of fitness tracking apps is that you should never check them first thing out of bed. So it should never be the first thing in your mind of, oh, let's see how I slept last night. Get up, go about your day, and then later on in the day, sync your ring or sync your watch to your phone and see how you slept. Because at that point, your sort of emotional attachment to it is going to be a lot lower than getting out of bed and looking and going, oh, the Oura Ring said I had a shit night's sleep, but I feel amazing.
The Oura Ring basically calls me a cunt every morning. If I listen to my Oura Ring, I'd never fucking train, I'd never get up, I'd just stay in bed forever. I wish the app would remember that I'm shit and just give me a few, give me a break every now and again. I wake up, I get a sleep score of 35, and the Oura Ring goes, you nutter, Dan, don't worry.
What's your HRV, Dan?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's I remember talking about it with you before, and it was good, a couple of degrees or something.
Oh, it has. I didn't remember that, but yeah, okay.
But yeah, no, my actual sleep score is always wank, 40 max.
What do you actually take before bed to help you sleep? See, I've got really bad sleep apnea. I can't even remember
what I've got. I just go to my sponsor and I'm fill this bag. And he goes, oh yeah, you need all this and this. And I tried CBD and stuff like that. I also tried heavy sleeping meds and stuff like that. But the thing about the sleep is not that I don't want to be asleep, it's that I wake up, and it doesn't matter what I take, I wake up lots. and I'm a light sleeper. You know, if the missus is up at 5 because she PTs, like I'm basically like up and down, like then it's kind of fucked from 5. I don't know.
What happens if you sleep on the sofa? Like, because of my sleep apnea, if I sit upright, I can sleep better.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the mask is like, all right, I sleep, but I want to sleep on my side because I've always slept on my side to avoid doing the like suffocating thing. And now obviously I've got the mask and you can't really sleep on the side. So I'm just in this like middle area of trying to get used to it. And obviously the heat doesn't help. You know, I'm pretty around 300 pounds of shit. So that's not helping, let's be honest. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring the Aura ring, and that's one point I say about this, about the phone. Don't wake up and look at your phone. Yeah. Like that's Instagram, that's fucking any of your apps, any of the thing. Wake up and try and adjust your mentality all on your own, rather than waking up and being responsive to some data analysis. Some cunt on Instagram says that they don't like pull push. Or, you know what I mean? Like, you know, there's some tempers frayed on Instagram. I don't know whether it's so Johan and Drew Walker fucking got their penises out pretty.
What? What happened here? I didn't see it.
I was just like literally just like watching the comments going,
What was it about?
I was like, Drew Walker said that progressive overload, it was shit or whatever, and then there was like some middle ground where they didn't really disagree, but they're obviously both taking Tren or something, and then they like got to a point, and then Drew was like, "Oh, how about your shit calves and hamstring?" And that was off. It was off. He started talking about his pec tear. Oh, madness! It was mad. It was great. Loved it.
It was like playground antics, though.
Oh, mate, it was fucking amazing. I was talking to Johan, like, on we play COD together because we're that sad. And I was like, ha, very funny you say the things. But yeah, just, like, waking up and having... That's why I deleted Facebook, because Facebook made me have anxiety ever since lockdown happened, because everyone was going to die, and then everyone was racist, and then everyone was a dead racist, and then I was just like, this is all too much. This is all too much. I don't want to be any of these things. And I just, I think, good point about the Aura ring, because sometimes if I look at it and I'm like, oh, I had 4 hours, I've already told myself my day's a write-off, whereas if I'd have like waited and just gone, well, I feel okay anyway, do you know what I mean? And I think that there are some people that if they got 5 hours sleep a night would literally like die. If I'm hitting like 3 a night and stuff like that, I do feel like I move into a parallel universe. But I'm quite close to that anyway. I think I'm about 6 degrees out. Like, so I do feel like a little bit like, there's that bit on Fight Club, isn't it? Everything's just a copy of a copy of a copy. But yeah, I don't really know where I'm fucking going with this. But don't
I know, like, where are you going?
Right, so I'll move on to another question anyway. Yeah. But this one's quite relevant to Jack, I suppose. But somebody asked it on my Instagram feed. Top 3 supplements for tested athletes.
Vegan protein powder.
Tampons.
Super greens.
A sign making. Sign making, so you can write natty on your. Maybe make a few ornaments.
I don't think you need to tell them you're natty. I think it'd be pretty obvious.
You did it. Oh.
Jack hasn't said it once today. You can see him itching to say it.
It looks like he's frozen.
Yeah, it's frozen. That's why I answered for him. I'm pretty sure the answers were the same.
Jack
is big grin.
Jack is pretty much non-natural now being on this podcast.
Yeah.
He's halfway there, bro.
In the test.
He's guilty by association. I think we'll skip that one then.
So we talked about natty athletes. You know, Kai Green's natty now apparently. See that?
He's vegan.
I know.
Kai Green's natty, and who's the other one? The
Michael Hearn.
Yeah, he's natty as well. So just, you know, from a scientific perspective, if we take those 2 specimens, maybe analyze how they are, and then maybe, you know, conjure up a methodology on how we think they got there naturally.
He turned pro naturally, didn't he?
No, he didn't. None of them did anything natural ever.
Which one? Kai.
Kai did, yeah.
Yeah, he was, wasn't he? He was natural.
I mean, I
I
believe
don't
so.
know. He wasn't a pro when he fucked a melon, and that didn't look natty.
It was a grapefruit, wasn't it?
Well, grapefruit melon. I wasn't looking at the melon.
You watched it.
Wasn't looking at the fruit. Some other ropey stuff going on there.
Right, let me move on to a more constructive question then.
I don't even think Jack wasn't even online when he roasted.
No, I missed half of it.
Oh yeah, go back to that one.
Oh, yeah, no, it's got real Jack.
Three supplements. Was it three
Would
supplements?
would you rather be a lentil or a turnip or an artichoke?
Fuck's sake, Dan. Anyway.
A lentil.
Solid high protein.
Bit more protein in that, isn't it?
Good.
Yeah, so obviously I guess it's for Dr. Dean, the top 3 supplements for tested athletes. So I guess Jack would be interested in that one.
Who's answering it though?
Dr. Dean.
That's a difficult question because I always get these things even for assisted athletes. You know, I'm going on gear. What's the best supplements I should take? And it's great for people who have sponsorships because they go, oh, take this product and take this. And, here's my code, and I learn some money on the affiliation. But I guess for natural, obviously, probably creatine monohydrate is probably the top one. It's like a no-brainer. And then I guess, depending on diet setup, maybe a multivitamin and multi-mineral. Specifically, one that has maybe boron or copper, that has a wide spectrum of minerals, not like some, Optimen or something from Opti Nutrition has pretty rubbish vitamin or mineral content within it. And then like the third one, maybe protein powder. It depends again on their diet setup. And obviously budget towards eating whole food. So
also available at Supplement Needs.
Do you want to go on with the Supplement Needs? But,
So
that's like, I always get that question even if you turn around for enhanced athletes. And for an enhanced athlete, I always prefer to say, like, what does your blood work look like on cycle, and then address that from there, rather than saying, oh, take heart stack, liver stack, kidney stack, whatever. Rather than giving someone all these, like, I guess, long listed protocols of health supplements to take, one, it can give them a false sense of security, thinking, oh, if I take this, I'm not going to die. And then the other side,
and then they die.
Yeah. And then the other side is their budget. They could be spending like £100 on supplements that could be better spent on food, or gym membership or whatever else. If they've got a budget to live by.
Yeah.
Can you out supplement being a pussy?
Is that an actual question, or?
Yeah, just hear it from the science guy. We're gonna take that as a no.
No, I don't think so. I mean, unless you turn someone who trains like a pussy into a demon when you load them up with metal training.
Yeah.
Halo testing.
Just having a stab at the people and their huge like lists of supplements and all that sort of stuff, where they find the money from, I don't know. And then you see their training videos and they're fucking pussies. But they sit there and think about all these things and how everything's affecting, and they try and get science, apart from having about 3 brain cells between their whole family, and it wasn't their week to have them, not like someone like you who knows what they're talking about. And then they combine all of this stuff that they don't know about, and then they train like a vagina war.
Yeah, I think, it's sort of like monkey see, monkey do. People see such a pro take such a supplement and goes, well, if they take that, this is where the magic comes in. It's sort of a bit like Nitrotech.
Yes. Loved a bit of Nitrotech back in the day, mate. I used to just look in the window like, oh.
Deltec was the one.
Nitrotech was the fucking, mate, you don't even know me. You're like 12. They didn't chat to me.
I got a tub of Celtec once, and I read the back of it, and it said, obviously, like, I think it was 18, so obviously I wasn't as clued into whatever. Creatine monohydrate, and it said, like, mix 3 scoops and 500 mils of water and drink after training. I think like 90 grams of sugar mixed in with 5 grams of creatine. I remember drinking it and afterwards going, oh, my stomach doesn't feel so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Banging headache and everything.
All of that day's food.
Yeah.
That's why you looked really ripped.
You're probably supposed to do a huge shot of log with that. That's probably why.
Yeah, but back then, all we had, obviously, Dr. Dean will say, and Dan, because we're the old guys, all we had was the magazines. So if they said in the magazine that Mr. Olympia was using Celtec, we were getting a fucking tab of Celtec. We were going to be Mr. Olympia.
He wouldn't lie. Why would he lie? He's only paid to make the advert in the magazine, and that's the only reason it's there. There's no reason to lie.
Yeah.
Celtec it is.
Back when protein bars tasted like clay.
They were something back in the day, weren't they?
There's a steroid that's all of a sudden popped up in my end of South Wales called SARMs.
Right.
Oh, steroid.
What's your views on them? Because I heard there's a couple of monkeys on there slamming them down there.
So SARMs are selective androgen receptor modulators. That's what the abbreviation's for. And basically, when you take steroids, anabolic steroids, they act at the androgen receptor. But they can have two effects. They can either be anabolic or they can be androgenic. So obviously anabolic, muscle tissue, muscle growth, blah, blah, blah. And then the androgenic is obviously prostate growth, hair loss, oily skin, all those sort of side effects that we don't want. So what they tried to do was figure out how they can separate the androgen receptor interaction so that we only get muscle building properties. So they're purely anabolic, as to speak. And most of the research that's come out, like I studied these when I was doing my PhD, the likes of ostarine and S4 androgen, they were sort of starting to come out into the underground sort of scene of, you know, the structures of the molecules had been published, and then you get, you know, underground labs going, let's make that and suspend it in water and sell it on the underground. So when you look at the research and the dosages, yes, at certain dosages, they were able to prove that you could get muscle mass to grow without, you know, the androgenic side effects or without potentially shutting down the HPTA. So, you know, your natural testosterone was still present. So when you look even more carefully then at the research and the dosages that started to be applied, like the higher dosages, you start to see this selective muscle building sort of move away, and the HPTA starts to get shut down, which isn't what they're designed to do. So if we sort of look at the effects of, say, for example, probably the most well-studied is ostarine, its anabolic properties are quite similar to anavar in a sense. So in theory, you know, a low dose of ostarine may not have the same sort of side effects in a female as anavar. But as a whole, they're sort of fool's gold. They're like, again, they're like a Celtec. And that, you know, the research is sort of sold on them that they're these magic compounds, when in fact, you know, the actual applicable science is null. The likes of ostarine, that's gone back into clinical trials, phase 3 clinical trials in cancer patients for high dosages, because they're able to justify, well, if these cause side effects, you know, a cancer patient is like the last resort person, that if these compounds stop muscle wasting and they stop or help with strength and resiliency for that person's body, well then, you know, the negative sort of offset towards the HPTA might be, you know, I guess, justified with a cancer patient than a normal human. So that research has been ongoing for the last 2 years. So we'll probably get data off that within the next year and a half. And then it might be approved for cancer use only. But versus the studied steroids that have dated back from the 50s, you know, they're not really on par. So again, what we sort of have to consider there is quality control issues, which is probably just the same as underground gear anyway. You're sort of taking a chance on these products being actually what they are. And I've seen blood work from people who have taken SARMs, and they come to me and their lipid panel is in the gutter, like their HDL is 0.4. And I'm thinking, you know, okay, they're saying they took ligandrol or whatever, LGD 400.
D-ball.
And it's either spiked with D-bol or Anavar, because, you know, I'm looking at HDL markers that reflect oral anabolic steroid use. And this is how they sort of buy you into it, and that, you know, it's sort of like a grey market compound that's been spiked. So it gives you an effect to think that, you know, you're getting what you need. But unless you're actually doing blood work, it's probably harming you to the same extent as steroids.
They're very big over here. A lot of people use them over here.
Yeah, and again, there's a new thing coming out of injectable SARMs, which to me, like, does make no sense. Because
they're suspending it in oil as well.
They were designed to have oral efficacy, to be compounds that can be taken orally. So by injecting them, it offers no difference to how they interact in the body.
You really think so?
Yeah. I mean, from a fundamental, like, pharmacology level, they offer no difference being injected versus oral.
That's
Whereas,
crazy.
You know,
why are they making injectables then?
Just for the novelty.
Money.
Yeah, I guess so.
Money.
I guess so.
They look more effective.
I got an interesting question. I read something recently, right? There's a few studies on this actually, Dean. Something that I personally don't really haven't really prioritized when taking supplements is like actual minerals. And obviously, I take the supplement needs multivitamin, mineral, and vitamin B, etc., and the health stuff. But so it started with me struggling to contract my abs. And then I was talking to someone, and we looked into the fact that if you're deficient in certain minerals and vitamins, you're like downgrading your being able to contract certain muscles by like 68, 70%. Do you agree with this? Because I've started taking vitamin A, E, and some other ones, and it's massively changed how I contract my abs, and it's fucking blown my mind.
Not that I've read about. I know, you know, obviously how a muscle contracts is under electrical potential, and that involves the movement really of sodium and potassium, and then to a lesser extent calcium and magnesium, and that's how your muscles are under, you know, electrical influence contract. So, you know, sodium enters, potassium leaves, calcium enters, magnesium enters, and you know, that leads to a contraction in the fiber because of the change in the electrical potential. I've never heard of vitamin A or E or, you know, D having a positive influence on how we contract things.
Because it said, I saw something about, obviously I don't really understand. When I was reading this study, it was saying that improves like what you're saying there about the electrolyte uptake and being able to get a bit higher contractile force through muscle fibers or something like that. And I was like, wow. Just kind of blew my mind.
I've never seen it. Like, I know, for example, you know, you need to make sure that you are getting sufficient electrolytes daily between sodium and potassium, making sure those two are balanced, making sure that you're getting enough magnesium because it is probably the most abundant mineral in your body. And then, you know, other things underneath that mineral wise would be copper, zinc, vitamin A, which isn't a mineral, but vitamin A would be another thing for immune system health. But, you know, for contractions, it's mainly got to do with the electrolytes, which are, you know, sodium, potassium, chlorine, magnesium, and calcium.
And also what I said earlier about, I heard about equipoise depleting GABA and trend depleting serotonin from the brain. Is this true?
So
that's why.
So what can happen is with trenbolone, it can influence how dopamine is made in your brain. So this is where we have a big fallout post-tren use in terms of depressive symptoms, because of it pushes the potential of your dopamine receptors to a higher level. So basically you need this much dopamine to get an effect, whereas when you remove dopamine, you know, your receptors come back to, I guess the levels of tren come back, dopamine, I mean, come back to here. But your receptors are still here in your brain. So you're never stimulating those receptors with enough dopamine. And what can happen is you can deplete neurotransmitters from your brain, but you can also, I guess, slow down the metabolism of the neurotransmitters. So the main one with tren, like I said, is dopamine, and that's controlled by being metabolized through an enzyme called COMT. So COMT is involved with the metabolism of estrogen. So it helps to metabolize estrogen out of your body, but also helps to metabolize dopamine to norepinephrine and adrenaline. So when you're lying in bed at night after taking tren, you can't relax. That's because of that increase in dopamine in your brain. That COMT enzyme isn't operating efficiently because it's having to deal with, say, if you have high levels of estrogen from your contest stack, COMT is going to be running slower. So that's sort of where, when you are in sort of a pre-contest setting, that you should increase your magnesium, because magnesium is the core element to COMT's function. And so giving your body excess magnesium is going to help support your brain in clearing out that dopamine so that you can relax to go to sleep. Equipoise, there is certain theories around how it does influence with GABA, but I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But again, because of, I guess, COMT as well can be slowed down by androgens also. The same as MAOA, which is an enzyme in your brain that breaks down serotonin. That gets slowed down by androgens as well. So you have higher levels of serotonin in your brain, which again can get depleted through aggression. So it's sort of, you know, this is sort of something from earlier on. I was going to say that when, you know, young guys are using steroids and not being educated on what they're doing with their first cycle, say for example they're using tren and testosterone in high dosages, they can be setting themselves up for quite a bad mental imbalance post-cycle without having ever been coached that this is going to happen, and they can lead up to have very bad depressive symptoms post-cycle, even if they do drop to TRT or testosterone only, because of how those neurotransmitters get imbalanced.
Yeah, so like obviously what you're saying there is not, it's not directly also just from the hormone imbalance, it's from the serotonin imbalance too.
Yeah, but the hormones are what actually upset that balance. So we know, you know, testosterone, tren can speed up the amount of dopamine that's made at your receptors, and obviously the more dopamine in your brain, the more your brain requires. And that's sort of where, say someone does a PCT after using tren and test, and I mean a full PCT to restore back their natural function, that person can still exhibit what's called androgen steroid induced hypogonadism. And that's basically where they have normal levels of testosterone, but certain functions like sexual function, libido hasn't returned, like they can't maintain an erection, anything like that, because of that dopamine metabolism in their brain is still at a high threshold. So they're never getting mentally stimulated with enough dopamine to get sexually aroused.
So how would you like adjust with that?
And how to adjust for that is just time and patience. Unfortunately,
there's nothing you can supplement like 5-HTP for the serotonin or anything.
So you could take L-Dopa, but if you think about this, those receptors are now at a high threshold. So by you putting dopamine in, you're sort of fueling that fire that you're going to have to keep taking L-Dopa to meet that neurotransmitter demand. Whereas if you're a patient, and again, you know, it's an unfortunate fact, but if you're a patient and allow those receptors to come back to where they were previously, well, then you're going to get stimulation from normal levels then. And that's sort of what drives people back on cycle following doing a full PCT, is that
it's so interesting. Yeah,
they feel like shit because they've no sex drive, even though their blood work looks perfect. You're trying to explain to them that you have a dopamine issue in your brain that can literally only resolve itself with time. And there is no time period. You can't tell someone, you know, it's going to take 6 months, it's going to take a year, it could take 5 years. It really depends on that person's, I guess, underlying genetics for dopamine, as well as the activities that they partake in. You know, something as stupid as constantly watching pornography, which will increase your dopamine. If that person's always doing it, then, you know, normal sexual arousal is never going to reach that dopamine threshold. And that's sort of when you tell someone who's in that sort of scenario that, you know, you have to sort of limit your exposure to high dopamine activities to allow that receptor to relax. They don't seem to really understand, but that's just a really unfortunate side effect to steroid use. And, you know, we're going to see big effects in the next 20 years of a lot of mental health damage from, you know, irresponsible use through this way. Where, you know, a 20-year-old is running test and train, and when they're in their 40s, their dopamine metabolism is in the gutter because of how high they've pushed that threshold over the years.
So again, like, just there's nothing to help supplement that apart from, like you're saying, taking it, but then you're just making it worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know, it's crazy, but that whole libido issue post cycle can be completely neurotransmitter imbalanced.
So elevated COMT makes you a CUNT then.
when you have a slow COMT, will make it a CUNT because you'll have tons of dopamine.
You can't get a boner. Picking up the wrong type.
So say you're on cycle and that threshold's really high, you come off and you never get back to that threshold, and then you wait, so then it's back to in normal range. Then surely when you go back on again, it's just going to go fuck again, right?
It can, yeah, depending on how much dopamine is made in your brain. Yeah, it's a neurochemistry is such a fine balance that a lot of people fail to appreciate how much it plays into your, I guess, your normal daily life. You know, having adequate serotonin to maintain a happy mood, but also, you know, low serotonin can make you very aggressive. So if you use up all your serotonin, not only can it make you depressed, it can make you very aggressive as well.
Dan?
And for serotonin, you just supplement with 5-HTP, tryptophan too, or no?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, with 5-HTP, you're adding in more serotonin. But again, it comes down to that enzyme of MAOA that breaks down serotonin. So if that enzyme is working too fast, you're clearing your serotonin too quickly.
Can you get a measurement of that MAOA?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can get your genetics tested. And again, that's a big thing. Is
that spit or is that blood or?
A spit test, yeah. But that's a big thing. If you think about it, right? If you know your MAOA status, which I do, you can see your susceptibility to depression because you can see how fast your brain's going to clear serotonin from itself. So like in my case, I have MAOA++, which means that the MAO enzyme is operating 70 times faster than a normal person. So you know, depression runs within, you know, my mother's side of the family, which was never ever, you know, figured out from a root cause perspective. And then I looked at my genetics and it was like, wow, that all makes sense. But can you imagine if everyone knew their MAOA genetics? They'd know how fast serotonin is getting depleted from the brain. They'd be able to, you know, take certain supplements that can slow down MAOA so serotonin stays in their brain longer.
What would that be?
Yeah, so stuff like St. John's wort, or, you know, there's a few different things, but you have to be very careful again that if you slow down MAOA, too much serotonin in your brain will make you, like I said, it can make you both aggressive and depressive.
The best combo. I'm just trying to figure out, am I still allowed to watch porn? I was trying
I wouldn't recommend it, but
and if the porn's violent, then okay, because I'll be on a threshold. And like, is this like why when you start off on Pornhub and like, you know, just looking at some normal shit, there's some vagina there. I like vagina. Yeah, cool. And then after, you know, you go down the rabbit hole, next thing you know, it's like some like limbless guy in like a swing and like midgets come in and they're like, you know, they set fire to each other's hair to fuck. And is that why that happened? Like, is that kind of like the threshold? Can it happen that quickly? You know?
Sounds like porn addiction.
Well, you know, that's the lockdown's been a strange time. And to be fair, although I'm getting married, like, I wouldn't fuck.
Anyway.
Let's see. Oh, it's quite funny because my girlfriend sat on the sofa, she just yearned down, she just burst out laughing. So,
well, I've just got a spare afternoon. If she wants to become two separate people, my serotonin becomes too high.
Yeah, ever done much research into this Imodium, this advanced cortisol inhibitor?
Ryan, are you going to go through your whole line of supplements asking for Dean's opinion?
They're interesting questions that people would like answers to.
No one knows what you're talking about. I still think Imodium's something where you poo.
Polygonum cubsadium extract.
Have you got it all out in front of you? You shouldn't.
Yeah, of course.
This is going to be a long time.
Everyone not noticed his supplement is all by his computer.
I haven't actually looked at the studies, Ryan and Imodium. I know it is a cortisol blocker. But, you know, if you look back at the 90s, bodybuilders, they used a compound called Cytodren.
Yeah.
That was a big part to, you know, the likes of Andre Munster's cycle and some of the other guys in the 90s. And basically,
I've been taking it the last like 3 days, and I look so much drier. I'm like, wow.
But you see, if you're blocking cortisol in your body, cortisol operates between cortisol and cortisone, the storage form. So while it could be blocking your cortisol from working, it could be turning that cortisol to cortisone, which gets stored in your body and eventually gets released again. So, you know, it's Cytodren's usage back in the 90s was very risky because, again, that completely depletes your cortisol, which you need for a stress response. So you need cortisol to wake you up in the morning. So if you're blocking cortisol actively, you know, in the morning time, it has a physiological function to help you stay alert in the morning time. So it's not something that, okay, we don't want excess cortisol and we don't want the circadian rhythm of cortisol release to get disturbed. So obviously you want high cortisol in the morning, low cortisol at night to go to sleep. And it should, you know, peak about 8 or 10 in the morning and then drop off by midday and drop off another touch as you go to sleep. But if you're blocking that cortisol, you know, you're stopping some of the processes in your body that rely on cortisol function. So it might not be the wisest supplement to take every single day just for the fact of blocking cortisol's action. You're probably better off using stuff that supports cortisol metabolism, which will clear the cortisol from your body. And that's sort of, you know, phosphatidylserine, you know, what's in cortisol for what I put in the PM stack for supplement needs. A really high dose of phosphatidylserine helps to shunt cortisol for metabolism.
I actually have a pure phosphatidylserine powder that Ben gave me. It tastes like fucking shit. But I do notice that it's in the priming stack, isn't it? And then it's in some of the Morphogen, fucking Morphocalm, and their sleep products too. But if you really think that's a very good ingredient for, so you're completely stopping cortisol, not just like pausing it in the body.
So the Imodium, I haven't really looked at research, like I said. So, but if it is a cortisol blocker, you know, it's going to have downstream effects. So you don't really want to be blocking cortisol long term.
Do you want to end up like Munster, Ryan, basically?
Love to.
What, in the ground?
Maybe not. I'm not going to take 500 milligrams of Anadrol all day, but...
Shredded, but in the ground.
Shredded.
That's why I want to talk about balancing and controlling estrogen and fucking cortisol, because it stresses me out. I don't want any more panic attacks.
There's nothing that can sort your stress levels out, Ryan.
I don't know.
You get stressed about getting stressed.
Yeah, I know. Maybe I need to test my MAO. That's what I need.
It still sounds like a rap song to me. My MAO. I've never heard it on the radio.
My appendix.
You know, I got fucking. You know, I was on the phone, right?
His appendix got a blow.
My phone.
I know you were on the phone, actually.
I got fucking pulled over, didn't I? That's why I fucking hung up.
Oh, that's where you went.
Yeah.
Did
you get your letter out?
Oh, doctor! He's a doctor! He's here!
He read it. No, so he pulled me over, and then he was like, "I just saw it was a rental car." I gave him my British license. He was like, "Oh," because obviously they can't do anything with it. So every time you get pulled over, they're like, "Oh."
They just threw it in the bin.
Well, he's like, "Yeah, it's okay, man. Just please don't do this, and this again."
Fuck you,
I'm like,
guys.
yeah, thank you.
Oh, hi, Ron.
On that bombshell.
Wasn't much of a bombshell, was it?
on that knowledge bombshell.
Ryan, are you sure you haven't got anything else in your stack you'd like to specifically target?
I reckon Ryan rattles when he walks.
100%.
Ian, what did you think about powdered Omega products? I tried this more for Omega.
Fuck off, Ryan.
Powdered Omega product.
I think Ryan's drastically overestimated our demographic of viewers. No one knows what you're talking about, Ryan. Like, I think I managed to dull it down most of the doctor. I didn't really know most of what he was talking about, and I'm a teacher. But yeah, Imodium's for pooing, as far as I'm concerned. Check this guy out.
Look at him.
Wrong boy.
I still haven't tried those chewable fish oils yet, Dean.
Oh, you just chew the head here, and then
It's still out of stock.
Oh.
So Omega Pro is coming back in next week, hopefully.
But the only thing is when he sends me stuff, it takes a couple of months to get it. At the moment, anyway.
Well, that's customs for you.
Fucking, I know. Crazy.
It's all right. Apparently, Ryan's got supplements coming from everyone anyway, so.
Can we build a sort of crescendo before this just dribbles?
It's just fucking.
This is the real conversation people want to listen to.
Let's do the 5 tips. That's a good.
There it is. Yeah.
The 5 tips. So we ask everyone who comes on the show, since I think Ryan asked it once. So well done.
Well, Ryan.
5 tips that you would give someone. So we'll say the average bodybuilder of things that they should look out for or consider on their fitness journey when the hashtag
5 tips.
5 big tips. Mr. O ripped out never give up last week, so you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to be Mr. O to say that.
I guess number 1, when you walk into the gym, see the biggest guy that you see, don't go over and ask him for advice.
That is fucking.
I lost all my business now. Can we edit that out?
I won't be talking to Johnny anymore.
Now literally no one will talk to me. Brilliant.
Well, I can't complain because that does get quite annoying when you're in the gym and someone comes up with their phone and goes, "Hey mate, I've got this blood work here and can you have a look?" I'm like, I'm in the middle of doing a leg press set.
Yeah, it's like, cool. Oh, you're a mechanic. Can you just come around the house and just maybe just map my car for me? Cool. Like number 1. That's good.
Number 2, I guess supplements aren't an insurance policy. So don't fall into the trap like we discussed of, taking a certain supplement is going to protect your kidneys or protect your liver or protect your heart, because at the end of the day, they're there to offset some of the negative consequences. They're not there to fully protect you. So I guess then number 3, be sensible and get blood work at least twice a year if you're an enhanced user. And if not, get blood work done 6 weeks into your first ever cycle or 6 weeks into any cycle so you can see what happens to your health. Because normally what ends up happening is you get blood work done after a blast and you look at it and go, oh, everything's green. But when you're on cycle, your HDL's in the gutter and your LDL's through the roof. You're looking at your blood work thinking, oh, everything's cool here. So, understanding what happens to your body when you're on cycle will lead to less surprises later on in life. Number 4, I guess try and focus on yourself and not focus on what others are doing. That's a big thing these days. So, don't fall for the trap of trying to imitate what others are doing. Obviously take inspiration from others, but don't fall in the trap of because someone is doing certain drug dosages that you need to do them. And then number 5, I guess like we said, every day just when you wake up in the morning, try and be grateful for one thing and, be present when you wake up first thing in the morning. Ground yourself and then obviously allow yourself to enter into the realm of the digital world. But, far too many people get stressed, lose sleep because they're constantly thinking about what's happening on their phone or emails. You know, give yourself 10 minutes. You know, if your alarm goes off, if you can afford it, you know, lie in bed and just not meditate, but just think in your head, you know, okay, I'm awake, I need to do this today. Don't like fall into the trap of straight out of bed, straight into clothes, straight to work. Give yourself a few minutes in the morning time to adjust to what's going to happen later on. And so I think, yeah, that's it. It's the 5 tips.
Love it.
Yeah, I like that one.
Amazing. Thank you for coming, man. It's been
good to speak to you again, man.
Pleasure.
Iron out some like things and kind of match some of the bro science, and also just kind of lay it out for people that haven't had it laid out. Anyone who's watching, you know, and some people are scared to ask or whatever. So I think with the examples that you gave, with some of the numbers and stuff, I think that'll be fucking very.
Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, it's the sort of round that we're heading into is. It's no longer this sort of inner circle of, you know, knowing such and such a guy for this, that, and the other. It's, you know, you can walk into any gym within 10 minutes, find someone who's going to give you what you want. So this sort of open education, you know, making people aware of what can happen is going to be very important heading into the future.
Yeah, it's bread and butter, isn't it now? Like you said, the health kind of kickback we're going to see from people now, like, it's just normal. People are saying like, I'm going to start the gym, so I'll start cycle. I'm going to do it, you know, like, and, you know, we're going to see that come and hit somewhere else. Interesting. You've picked as well the psychological elements and being aware of the, like, kind of the changes that people might feel psychologically and to expect them. I think if you're prepared for them, it probably might not catch you such unawares.
Yeah. I mean, you know, even in like today's age with, you know, all the mental health issues that are going on, this is definitely not compound use that we need to be feeding into mental health issues, unfortunately.
Yeah. Fucking sick, man. I've loved having you. I'm definitely going to like ruin your life messaging you or something. No,
you start with me doing that for the last few years.
Right.
And Ryan's just going to give you a list of everything he's ever.
Don't worry. Every time Ryan meets me in person, he has a list of questions.
He does.
I bet that was one of the reasons you were. When I asked you to come on, you probably thought, oh, maybe I can make an excuse. Ryan's going to be there.
No, it was I've watched the podcast a few times. This is the first time I've ever done a 6-person podcast, so it's been definitely fun.
Well, I usually just chat shit over everyone. So. I apologize, but also I've been getting stick for not talking enough shit. But you can't talk shit over when fucking doctors just drop it.
Don't worry, you made up for it today.
Oh, well, fuck off, Jack, me. About me. Where did you?
On that bombshell, I think we should let the doctor go to work.
Fucking an hour ago.
Right. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Big love.
Take it easy, gents.
I can't turn the cunt off now.